The laser level read 843.61. The plans called for 841.90. A foot and 7/10 of daylight between what was true and what my superintendent wanted poured by Friday. I opened my mouth to say it one more time. Dale Pruitt looked at me the way you look at a flat tire on a schedule you can't miss, and said 6 words that ended 30 years of me trusting that being right was enough. Before we jump back into the day's story, I've got some exciting news. We've officially launched a brand new channel called Tales Beneath Skin, and that's where all our stories are heading from now on. If you can't get enough of blue-collar work revenge stories, this is the place for you. Brutal bosses getting what they deserve, satisfying workplace payback, and the kind of justice you love to see. And we never leave you hanging. We track down every update and plot twist so you get the complete story, start to finish, all in one place. So make sure you head over and subscribe to Tales Beneath Skin right now so you don't miss a single story. You'll find the link in the description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Now, back to it. There's a particular cold that gets into a highway job in early March, before the sun clears the tree line and after the coffee's already gone lukewarm in the cup holder. It comes up out of the graded subbase like the ground is exhaling something it's been holding all winter. I'd felt that cold for 30 years. That morning it felt like a warning I was too stubborn to read. I was running grade on the northbound lanes of the Route 9 relocation, a $15 million stretch of new highway carved through what used to be dairy pasture and swamp maple. My job was simple to explain and hard to do right. I made sure the dirt ended up at the elevation the engineers designed, not close. Right. A road is nothing but water management with cars on top, and if the elevations are wrong, the water goes where it pleases and takes the pavement with it. I'd shot the north end 3 times that week. 3 times it came back high. Not a little. A foot and 7/10 of an inch too tall across a 200-foot run where a culvert was supposed to carry a seasonal creek under the roadbed. If we paved it at the elevation the crew had built to, that creek would have nowhere to go but sideways, and sideways meant under the road, and under the road meant frost heave, cracking, and a $15 million failure with a 10-year warranty. I'd flagged it Monday. I'd flagged it Tuesday. Wednesday, Dale had told me to quit chasing ghosts. Thursday morning, I plant myself in front of his truck, with my field book open and my finger on the number. Dale Pruitt was 58, built like a man who used to work with his hands and now worked with his phone. He had a completion bonus riding on paving before the spring inspection window and a general contractor calling him every 4 hours asking why the north end wasn't ready. He looked at my field book the way he looked at everything that slowed him down, like it was a personal insult dressed up as paperwork. The stakes are wrong, he said. Survey blew the stakes. We built to the stakes. We built to the stakes. That's on them, not us. The stakes are right, I said. I pulled the design file myself. The GPS matches. It's the fill that's wrong. Somebody built a 1.5 feet over grade. Nobody caught it until me. Nobody caught it, he repeated, because there's nothing to catch. I should have stopped there. A younger man would have. But I'd spent 30 years learning that the moment you let a wrong number ride is the moment you stop being any good at your job. So I said the thing you're never supposed to say to a superintendent on a schedule. Dale, if we pave this, it's coming back up. And when it does, it's not going to have your name on it. It's going to have the whole company's name on it. I'm not putting my hands on it. The crew had gone quiet the way a crew does when they can feel weather coming. Dylan Fisher, the survey kid, 24 and holding a rod he'd forgotten he was holding, stared at the ground. Dale's jaw worked. And then he said it, flat and final, loud enough for every man on that grade to hear. Pull that machine over and walk. 6 words. I'd like to tell you I had something profound to say back. I didn't. I climbed off the dozer, set the parking brake out of habit. You don't stop being good at your job just because your job stopped wanting you. Then I walked 200 yards of frozen subbase to my truck, in front of 11 men who wouldn't meet my eye. What Dale didn't know, what nobody on that grade knew, was that I'd been keeping the record, not out of spite, out of 30 years of habit. Every shot, every date, every override, written down in a field book that fit in my back pocket. The road was wrong. I had the proof. And they'd just told me to leave. To understand how bad it was, You have to understand what a foot and 7/10 actually means on a road, and I'm going to explain it plain, the way I'd explain it to Lorna at the kitchen table, because the plain version is the one that matters. Water runs downhill. That's the whole business. When engineers design a highway, they design a giant invisible sculpture out of slope. Every lane tilted just enough to shed rain. Every low point aimed at a pipe. Every pipe aimed at a ditch. Every ditch aimed at a creek that was there before any of us. The design elevations aren't suggestions. They're the shape of where the water is allowed to go. The north end of Route 9 crossed an old drainage, a shallow, stubborn creek that only ran hard in spring and after storms, but ran. The plans put a culvert under the road there, a big concrete box with the roadbed sitting at exactly 841/90 at the center line, so the creek had headroom to pass underneath, and the road shed water down toward it clean. Somebody, weeks before I ever shot it, had built the fill high, a foot and 7/10 over. Maybe the operator misread a stake. Maybe a stake got knocked and reset wrong. Maybe the earthwork crew rushed a lift and nobody checked. It happens. Dirt is honest, but the men moving it are tired and errors compound quietly. The problem wasn't that the error happened. Errors happen every day on every job. The problem was what happens when you pave over one. Once you put asphalt down, that mistake stops being a dirt problem you can fix with a dozer in an afternoon and becomes a concrete and blacktop problem that costs a fortune and a warranty to correct. The window to fix it cheap was open, but Dale was about to nail it shut. I'd first caught it the previous Friday, doing a routine QC shot before the base course went down. My laser read high. I figured operator error. Mine. I reshot it Monday off 2 different benchmarks. Same. I pulled the design file on my laptop in the truck at lunch and overlaid my shots. Same. By Tuesday I knew it wasn't me. The thing about being the grade checker is that you're the last honest set of eyes before the mistake becomes permanent. That's the whole point of the position. You exist to say stop at the one moment when stopping is still cheap. Dale had hired me for exactly that, and then fired me for doing exactly that, and I've turned that contradiction over in my head more times than I can count. Here's what I think now. With distance, Dale didn't think the road was right. Dale needed the road to be right, which is a different and more dangerous thing. He had a bonus and a deadline and a GC on the phone, and somewhere in his mind, the cost of being wrong had gotten so big he couldn't afford to look at it. So he decided the messenger was the problem. Get rid of the guy with the field book, and maybe the number goes away with him. But numbers don't work like that. That's the mercy and the cruelty of this trade. You can fire the man. You can't fire the elevation. I got home a little after 10 that Thursday morning, which is a time of day a working man is never supposed to be home, and Lorna knew before I got the truck door open. She was on the porch in her school bus jacket, the reflective stripes catching the pale sun halfway through her split shift. She'd seen my truck come up the road hours early, and she'd come out to meet it. "They let you go," she said. Not a question. 26 years of marriage and she could read my tailgate. I quit before they could, near as I can figure, I said. Dale told me to pull the machine over and walk, so I walked. She didn't say anything for a second. Lorna's a practical woman. Has to be, driving 40 kids twice a day and running our books on a school district paycheck and mine. I watched her do the math I'd been doing the whole drive home. The mortgage. 19 months left on the truck. Our daughter's last year of college, the health insurance that ran through the union hall as long as I logged hours. Then she came down the steps and put her hand flat on my chest over the coat. And she said, "Was the road wrong?" "Yeah," I said. "Foot and 7/10 over, the creek crossing. Then you did right." She said it plain, the way she says everything true. "We'll figure the rest out." I want to be honest with you here because this is the part people skip when they tell these stories. I did not feel brave. I felt sick. I felt 51 years old with a bad knee and a specialty that half the young guys did with a machine control screen now instead of a laser and a rod. I felt like a man who'd just chosen his pride over his family's health insurance, and I wasn't sure, standing in my own driveway, that pride was worth what it was about to cost us. But I'll tell you what I did that afternoon, instead of sitting in the dark feeling sorry for myself. I went out to the garage and I got the box. 30 years of field books. Little green write in the rain notebooks, waterproof, filled corner to corner with dates and elevations and station numbers in my cramped block print. A habit I picked up from an old-timer named Earl when I was 21, who told me, "Mason, the book is the only witness that doesn't get tired and doesn't get scared and doesn't change its story. Write it all down. You'll never need it until the day you need it more than anything." I found the Route 9 book. Every shot I'd taken, every date, and more than that, because I'm careful, because Earl trained me careful, I had photos on my phone. Time-stamped, GPS-tagged photos of the survey stakes with the design elevations written on them, standing right next to my rod showing what we'd actually built. I had the design file. I had emails where I'd flagged the discrepancy to Dale on Monday and Tuesday, and his replies telling me to quit chasing ghosts. I sat on an overturned bucket in my cold garage, and I laid it all out. And I realized I was holding something Dale Pruitt had no idea existed. Not a weapon. I didn't want a weapon. I wanted to be able to sleep. I was holding the truth, written down by a witness that didn't get scared. I put it back in the box. I figured I'd never need it. I hoped I never would. The road would fail or wouldn't, and either way I'd be off looking for the next job. I was wrong about needing it, but that was still a rainy spring away. The trade is smaller than it looks. That's the first thing you learn when you go looking for work in it after 50. The highway construction world in our part of the state runs on maybe a dozen serious outfits, and every one of them knows every other one, and the superintendents drink at the same 2 or 3 places at the annual road builders banquet. Word travels. Not fast exactly, but sure, the way water finds a low spot. By the second week, I understood that the story of Mason Phillips getting walked off the Route 9 job had already made its rounds, and it had made them in Dale Pruitt's version. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the mornings after Lorna left for her first route, coffee going cold at my elbow, working down a list of numbers I'd collected over 3 decades, project managers I'd worked for, estimators who knew my name, a couple of guys I'd trained who ran their own crews now. The calls all went about the same, friendly at first. "Mason, long time. How you keepin'?" And then a small change in the air when I explained I was looking. A pause. "I heard you left Pruitt's job." And I'd say yeah, and they'd say they'd keep me in mind, and I could hear the door closing politely on the other end of the line. One estimator, a decent man named Curtis I'd known 20 years, was honest enough to tell me straight. "Mason, between us, Dale's telling people you're a schedule problem. Says you'll shut a job down over 1/10 of a foot and won't take direction. I know you. I know that's not the whole story. But I got a GC who reads these things off a spreadsheet, and won't take direction at your pay rate is a hard sell right now. Won't take direction. That one sat with me. That's how it gets turned around, see? 30 years of taking direction, of doing the humble work of making other men's plans come out right, and the one time I wouldn't take a direction to build something wrong, I became a man who won't take direction. I didn't argue with Curtis. There's no arguing your way back into a reputation once it's been re-poured to somebody else's grade. I thanked him and I hung up and I sat there a while. I picked up 2 weeks of snow removal subcontract work through a guy at church. I did a bathroom remodel for a neighbor for cash. I fixed a retaining wall that a landscaper had built without drainage. Imagine that. And while I was back there setting the perforated pipe at the proper slope, hand-checking every foot of fall with a string level because I didn't have my good gear, I remember thinking, I still know how to do this. I still know how to make water go where it's supposed to. Nobody could take that out of my hands. They could just decline to pay me for it. That was the low part. I won't dress it up. There were mornings I looked at that green field book box in the garage and thought about doing something with it. Calling the state. Calling the GC, blowing the whole thing open, but I didn't. And not because I was scared, though I was some. I didn't do it because a man who reports a road out of spite looks exactly like a man Dale had already described, and I'd have been handing him proof of his own lie. I didn't have any authority to make anyone look. I was just the guy who got walked off. So I waited, not with a plan, with a habit. I kept a book in the box, and I kept looking for work, and I trusted the one thing I'd trusted my whole life. Water runs downhill. Sooner or later, it always tells. The kid called me on a Tuesday night in late April. I almost didn't pick up. I didn't have the number saved. "Mr. Phillips?" "It's Dylan. Dylan Fisher from the Route 9 crew, the rod guy." I remembered him. 24, sharp, the kind of young survey hand who actually read the design instead of just holding the pole where he was told. The kind who'd have been good in another 10 years if the trade didn't chew him up first. I remember you, Dylan. What's going on? There was a long pause, the kind where a young man is deciding whether to unload something he's been carrying. I've been thinking about that day, what you said, about the north end. Okay. They paved it, Mr. Phillips. Bakes course, then the binder. They're scheduled to put the top mat down next month. I ran QC stakes for the paving, and he stopped. The numbers you were shooting, they were right. I checked. I pulled the design file same as you did. That fills high. I don't know exactly how much, but it's a lot. And the culvert, the box they set for the creek, it's buried too deep now. The inlet's half choked already from silt because the approach grade is wrong. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Lorna looked up from her book. Why are you telling me this? I asked him. Not unkind. I needed to know what kind of call this was. Because you got walked off for being right and I stood there and didn't say anything, he said, and his voice cracked on it. I was scared for my job. I got a kid coming in September. I told myself it wasn't my call to make, but I saw it. I saw the same numbers you saw and I let them tell everybody it was you being difficult. And I keep thinking about that culvert when it rains. I want to tell you I gave that kid some wise speech. What I actually did was tell him the truth, which is usually wiser than a speech. Dylan, listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong by being scared. You did what a man with a baby coming does. But now you know a road's built wrong and the road doesn't care whether you were scared. So, here's what you do. You write it down. Everything you saw, every date, every shot. You don't tell Dale. You don't blow anything up. You just keep the record, quiet, the way I kept mine. And you keep your job and you keep your mouth shut and you wait. Wait for what? For the rain, I said. It's coming. It always comes. And when it does, somebody's going to go looking for who knew what. And when that day comes, you and me, we're going to have the only two honest books on the whole job. He was quiet a while. Then, you kept a record? 30 years of habit, I said. Write it down. Never need it till you need it more than anything. I hung up and I sat there in the lamplight, and I felt something I hadn't felt since the drive home in March. Not vindication. Not vindication. Was too early for that. Just the small, steadying knowledge that I wasn't the only one who'd seen it. The truth had two owners now. It gets harder to bury a thing when it lives in more than one place. There is a specific ache in watching something you warned about get built anyway. It's not anger exactly. It's closer to grief. I drove out to Route 9 once in early May. I don't fully know why. I told Lorna I was picking up a part in that direction, which was half true. Really, I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. They'd opened one lane to local traffic while they finished. I pulled onto the shoulder, a quarter-mile back from the creek crossing, and I looked at it. From a distance, it was a beautiful piece of road. That's the thing nobody tells you. A wrong road doesn't look wrong. It looks like a road. A smooth black binder course, clean shoulders, the stripping crew's temporary tabs marching off toward the horizon. $15 million of it, laid out under a May sky. Gorgeous and doomed. I could see the low point of the creek. To an untrained eye, it was nothing. To me, it was a held breath. The whole north approach sloped down toward that buried culvert like a funnel, and the funnel was aimed at a pipe that now sat 1.7 feet too deep, its inlet already gray-brown with the silt that a wrong grade drags into it. In a dry month, it would sit there, quiet as a photograph. In a wet one, he would try to move water it couldn't move, and the water would look for another way, and there is always another way. Under the base. Into the subgrade. Freeze in November, thaw in March, lift the pavement a hair. Do it again next year. And again. I didn't get out of the truck. I didn't take a picture. I'd already taken all the pictures that mattered. Back in March. I just sat there for maybe 10 minutes and I let myself feel the whole weight of it. Here's what I was grieving, if I'm honest. It wasn't the road. Roads get fixed. I was grieving an idea I'd carried my whole working life. The idea that if you were good at your work and honest about it, that would be enough. That being right was a kind of armor. I believed that at 21 when Earl handed me my first field book, and I'd believed it at 51 standing in front of Dale's truck, and it had turned out not to be true. Being right hadn't protected me. It had gotten me walked off in front of 11 men. That's a hard thing to unbelieve at my age. It's the kind of thing that can make a man bitter if he lets it, or make him quit caring, which is the same thing slower. I sat on that shoulder and I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. I decided I wasn't going to become bitter, and I wasn't going to become a man who reports roads out of spite. I was going to keep my book, keep my mouth shut, keep looking for honest work, and let the road be what it was going to be. If the state ever came asking, I'd tell them everything, plainly. If they never came, I'd carry it and let it go. I put the truck in drive, and I pulled back onto that smooth, wrong, beautiful road, and I drove over the creek crossing at 40 miles an hour, and I felt it under my tires. Nothing yet, just a road. I drove home and I didn't go back. The rain came about 6 weeks later. June came in wet. Not one big storm. Worse than that for a road. It came in as a week of steady, patient rain, the kind that doesn't make the news but soaks into everything and finds every weakness a thing has. I heard about it before I saw it, the way you hear about weather in a small trade. Curtis called me, the estimator, the honest one, on the second morning of it. You seen Route 9? He said. No. Why? North End's underwater. The new stretch. They opened it to traffic 3 weeks ago, and now there's a foot of standing water across 2 lanes at the creek. Dot shut it down last night. State's sending somebody out. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I felt about 4 things at once. I want to be honest about all 4, because a lesser version of this story would only tell you the good one. The first thing I felt was, and I'm not proud of it, relief. A low, guilty relief that I hadn't been crazy, that the number was real, that won't take direction was a lie, and here is a foot of water proving it. The second thing was worry, because standing water on a highway isn't a spreadsheet. It's a hydroplane. It's a car full of somebody's family at 60 miles an hour hitting a sheet of water they can't see in the dark. The wrong grade had stopped being an abstraction the moment they opened it to traffic, and I'd known it would, and knowing it hadn't helped anybody yet. The third thing was grief again, sharper now, because it didn't have to happen. There'd been an afternoon in March when a dozer in a couple of hours would have fixed the whole thing for the cost of nothing. And I'd stood there with the fix in my field book and been told to walk. And the fourth thing, underneath all the rest, was the plain, steady knowledge Earl had put in me 30 years back. Water runs downhill. Sooner or later, it always tells. It had told. Right on schedule. Not my schedule. Not my schedule. I drove out that afternoon in the rain, and this time I did get out of the truck. They had the north end barricaded, orange barrels and a flagger, and a Dot truck parked on the shoulder. And there it was. My held breath let out. A broad brown sheet of water lying across both northbound lanes at the creek crossing, exactly where the funnel aimed, exactly where the culvert sat too deep to take it. The inlet was completely drowned. The creek, denied its proper crossing, had simply spread out and taken the road for itself. Where the water had already receded on the approach, I could see the first of it, the fine dark cracks spidering out from the low point, the pavement starting to fail where the water gotten underneath, and the base had gone soft. 6 weeks old, that road, cracking already. I stood in the rain in my coat, and I looked at it a long time. There was no satisfaction in it, whatever I'd felt on the phone. There was just a wrong thing, made concrete, doing exactly what a wrong thing does. $15 million, finding the low spot. A Dot man in a rain slicker walked over, figuring me for a lost motorist. Road's closed, sir. You'll want to turn around. I know, I said. I used to work it. He looked at me a second longer than he needed to. I didn't say anything else. I got back in my truck and I drove home in the rain, and I told Lorna it had happened, and she held my hand across the table, and neither of us said much. There wasn't much to say. The thing I'd carried for 3 months had come true in the worst and most predictable way, and being right about it felt like nothing at all. Roman Evans called me 11 days later. I didn't know the name when it came up on my phone. A man's voice, careful and even, the voice of somebody used to reading rooms full of people who'd rather he wasn't there. Mr. Phillips, my name is Roman Evans. I'm a project engineer with the State Department of Transportation. I'm running the review on the Route 9 relocation. Do you have a few minutes? I sat down. I've got as many as you need. I understand you worked on the north end of that job earlier this year. As a grade checker, I did. Until March. Can I ask why you left? And here it was. The fork. I could have unloaded 3 months of grief and grievance into that phone. I could have told him about Dale, about pull that machine over and walk, about the reputation that got re-poured to somebody else's grade. Instead, I heard Earl in the back of my head. The book is the only witness that doesn't get scared and doesn't change its story. So I gave Roman Evans the book version. I flagged an elevation problem on the north approach at the creek crossing, I said. The fill was built high, 1.7 over design at the center line, across about a 200-foot run. I shot it 3 times off 2 benchmarks and pulled the design file to confirm. I told my superintendent it needed to come down before base course. He disagreed. He let me go. That's the plain version. There was a silence on the line, not an empty one. The silence of a man writing. How confident are you in that number, Mr. Phillips? 1.7. I'm certain of it, I said. And I don't need you to take my word for it. I've got the field book. I've got the shots, dated. I've got GPS-tagged photos of the survey stakes with design elevations next to my rod. And I've got the emails where I flagged it to my super twice and got told to quit chasing ghosts. Another silence. Longer. You kept all of that, he said. It wasn't quite a question. I keep everything, I said. 30 years of habit. An old-timer taught me, you write it all down, and you'll never need it until the day you need it more than anything. I heard him exhale on the other end. Mr. Phillips, I've got a drowned road, a culvert set too deep, an approach grade that doesn't match the design, and a set of as-built records that frankly don't add up. What I don't have is a clean picture of when the error happened and who knew about it. If what you're describing is real and documented, it would matter a great deal to this review. It's real, I said, and it's documented. When do you want it? Could you come in this week? Bring everything you have? I'll be there tomorrow morning if you want. Tomorrow's fine. A pause, and then, in a different tone, not official, just human. For what it's worth, Mr. Phillips, if you flagged this in March and were overruled, then you were the one person on that job who did their job correctly. I didn't say anything for a second. It's a strange thing hearing out loud from a stranger the sentence you've been saying to yourself alone for 3 months and half believing. Thank you, I said finally. It's been a while since anybody thought so. I hung up and I looked at Lorna, who'd been standing in the doorway with a dish towel in her hands the whole time, not pretending she wasn't listening. The state, I said. They're reading the book. She didn't smile exactly. She just set the towel down and came and put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, about time somebody did. The Dot District office was a low brick building off the state highway, the kind of place with fluorescent light and coffee that's been on the burner too long, and a lobby full of framed photos of ribbon cuttings. I carried the box in myself. I wouldn't let anybody else touch it. Roman Evans met me at the front, younger than his phone voice, maybe 40, with reading glasses pushed up on his head and the tired, careful manner of a man who spent his days being lied to by contractors and had learned to like it when somebody didn't. He walked me back to a conference room with a big table, and there were 2 other people there. A woman from the Dot's construction division and an older man he introduced as being from the engineering firm of record, the one whose stamp was on the design. I set the box on the table and I opened it, and I want to tell you what it felt like, because this was the moment the whole thing turned, and it didn't turn on a speech. It turned on paper. I laid out the Route 9 field book, opened to March, my block print marching down the page, station, date, design elevation, actual, difference, over and over. 841.90 design, 843.61 actual, plus 171. I laid out the printed emails, Dale's replies in black and white. Quit chasing ghosts, Phillips. Surveys on the stakes, not us. We pave Friday. I laid out my phone and scrolled to the photos. The survey stake with 841.90 grease penciled on it. My rod standing beside it reading a foot and 7/10 higher. The timestamp and the GPS coordinates burned into the corner of every frame. I didn't editorialize. I decided on the drive over that I wasn't going to. I just walked them through it the way I'd walk a green apprentice through a shot. Here's the design. Here's what got built. Here's the difference. Here's the date I caught it. Here's who I told. Here's what they said back. The room got very quiet. The engineer from the design firm put his own reading glasses on and bent over my field book and my photos, and I watched his face change, degree by degree, from professional skepticism to something closer to sickness. He was looking at the same thing I'd looked at in March, a $15 million road built on a wrong number, except he was looking at it 11 weeks and one flood too late, with his firm's stamp on the design and the state's investigators in the room. These photos are time-stamped in March, the woman from construction said. Before base course. Yes, ma'am, before base course. When it could still have been fixed with a dozer in an afternoon. And you reported it. In writing. Twice. It's right there. Roman Evans looked up at me across the table, and there was something in his face I hadn't expected. Not just satisfaction at finally having a clean thread to pull. Something like respect, and underneath it, something almost apologetic on behalf of a whole trade. Mr. Phillips, he said, do you understand what you're holding here? I've had 3 months to think about it, I said. I'm holding the reason none of this had to happen. He nodded slowly. You're also holding the reason it's going to get fixed right, and the reason the fix is going to land on the right desk. I looked at that box. 30 years of little green books, one of them cracked open on a dot conference table, finally being read by people with the authority to do something about it. And I thought about Earl, dead 9 years now, who taught a 21-year-old kid to write it all down. You'll never need it until the day you need it more than anything. This was the day. I wasn't in the room for the part that came after. I want to be clear about that because this is where a lesser version of this story would give me a front row seat to Dale Prowett's undoing, and I didn't have one. I heard it in pieces over weeks, the way you hear about weather, but I heard enough to know how it went, and how it went was this. They followed the paper. Roman Evans and his review didn't need me to accuse anybody. That was the thing I'd understood back in the garage in March, sitting on that bucket. A man who reports a road out of spite looks like a liar, but a field book doesn't look like anything except what happened. My records gave them a date. Once they had a date, March before base course, they knew exactly where in the paper trail to dig, and a highway job generates a lot of paper. What they found, as it came back to me through Curtis and later through Roman himself, was that the error hadn't started with Dale. The fill got built, high back in February, an honest mistake, a knock stake, a rushed lift, the kind of thing that happens and gets caught in QC every day. That part wasn't anybody's crime. That part was just dirt and tired men. The crime, if you want to call it that, was what happened after it got caught. Because I wasn't the only check that had flagged it. Buried in the job records were QC reports, Dillon stakes, an inspector's note, a discrepancy log that showed the north approach reading high going back before I ever put a laser on it. And against those flags, in Dale's own hand and Dale's own initials, were the overrides. Proceed. Grade approved per super. Moved to base course. Signed, dated, filed. He'd papered over it. He'd taken a known error 3 separate times and signed off on burying it under asphalt because the alternative was a delay, and a delay was a bonus he couldn't afford to lose. That's the thing that finished him. Not being wrong. Everybody in this trade is wrong sometimes. It was signing his name to knowing better. When Roman's review laid Dale's overrides next to my dated field book next to the flood, there was no version of it left where Dale was the man who got sabotaged by a difficult grade checker. There was only a superintendent who'd been told, in writing, 3 times and had initialed proceed every time. The general contractor cut him loose inside a month, quietly. There's no perp walk in road building, no dramatic firing in front of the crew like the one he'd handed me. Just a man who didn't get the next job and then didn't get the one after that. His state certification went under review. The last I heard, Dale Pruitt had left the highway side of the business entirely and gone to work managing a gravel pit 2 counties over, which in this trade is a kind of quiet exile. And I'll be honest with you, I took no joy in hearing it. I'd expected to. I didn't. Because here's the thing I understood by then. Dale hadn't destroyed himself out of malice. He'd done it out of fear. Fear of a deadline. Fear of a bonus lost. Fear of standing in front of his GC and saying I made a mistake and it's going to cost us time. That fear had gotten so big he'd rather bury a road than face it. And when a man is that afraid of being wrong, he doesn't need an enemy. He builds his own low spot, and the water finds it. I didn't beat Dale Pruitt. I never even spoke to him again. He beat himself, one proceed at a time, and all my field book did was hold the light while the state read what he'd already written. Roman Evans called me again in July. This time I knew the number. Mr. Phillips. The fix is going out to a corrective contract. They're going to have to mill out the north approach, drop the fill to design, reset the culvert to proper elevation, and repave, roughly the whole 200 feet, plus the transitions. He paused. It's expensive, nothing like what it would have cost in March, but that ship sailed. I know what it would have cost in March, I said, a dozer in an afternoon. You do. A dry, tired something in his voice. The reason I'm calling, the corrective contractor needs a grade checker who knows this specific piece of road cold, somebody who understands exactly what went wrong and can make sure it goes right this time. Your name came up. Frankly, your name was the only one that came up. Would you be willing to consult on the fix? I sat with that a second. There's a pride in a man that wants to say no. You had your chance. You walked me off. Figure it out yourself. I felt that pride. I want you to know I felt it. Because I don't want you thinking I'm some kind of saint who doesn't. But then I thought about the road, the actual road, and the actual creek that had been trying to cross under it since before any of us, and the actual family in the actual car that might someday hit that water in the dark if it wasn't done right. And I thought about the fact that being handed the fix was, in its own quiet way, the trade admitting what it hadn't been able to admit in March, that I'd been right, and that being right had value, even if it had arrived a flood too late. I'll do it, I said. On one condition, it gets built to design, to the 10th. And when I flag something, because I will flag something, that's the whole job. Somebody actually reads it this time. Mr. Phillips, Roman said, after what I've seen on this project, if you flag a 1/10 of a foot, I will personally drive out and look at it. You have my word. I want to tell you there was an apology in all this somewhere. A moment where Dale, or the GC, or the company that walked me off came around and said we were wrong about you, Mason. We're sorry. There wasn't. There never is. Not in this trade. Dale was gone to his gravel pit. The GC that had backed him just quietly hired me back through the corrective contract at a good day rate and never once mentioned March. That's as close to an apology as concrete ever gives you. They pay you to fix the thing they wouldn't let you prevent, and they don't say sorry, they just sign the check. And you know what? I'd made my peace with that. I hadn't done it for an apology. I'd done it because I couldn't put my hands on something I knew was wrong. The apology was never the point. The road was the point. I took the job. And the first morning I drove back out to Route 9 in the cool of an early July dawn, with the low sun coming up off the milled-out sub-base and that particular cold breathing up out of the ground. I set up my laser at the creek crossing, and I shot the first grade of the fix myself. 8.4 cooled Moyne, 9.6, dead on design. I marked it in a fresh green field book, same as I've done for 30 years, same as I'll do till my knees give out. It's a year and a half later now, and I want to tell you where I ended up, because these stories usually skip the ending that actually matters. The fix held. Of course it held. It was built to design. That first spring after the corrective contract, I drove out during a hard rain, the same kind of patient-soaking rain that had drowned it the year before, and I parked on the shoulder and I watched the creek crossing. The water came down the approach the way the engineers had drawn it, found the culvert inlet sitting at its proper elevation, and went where it was supposed to go, under the road, into the ditch, on down the drainage the way water's done in that spot since before there were roads at all. Not a drop on the pavement. Just a road, doing its quiet job in the rain. I sat there a while. Same shoulder I'd sat on in May, watching it built wrong. And this time what I felt wasn't grief, and it wasn't that guilty relief from the phone call. It was something plainer and better. It was just rightness. A thing built correct, doing what it was made to do. And me having had a hand in it. I'm still working. I'm out on a bridge approach job now, 2 towns over. And I'll tell you the truth about that old belief I lost on the shoulder that day in May. The idea that being good and honest was enough to protect a man. I got it back, but changed. It's not armor. It never was. Being right doesn't stop you from getting walked off a job in front of 11 men. Being honest doesn't pay your mortgage in the months after. I know that now in my bones. But it turns out being right isn't for protection. It's for later. It's the field book in the box. It's the witness that doesn't get scared and doesn't change its story. You don't do good work because it keeps you safe. You do it because it's the only thing that's still true when everybody's decided to believe something easier, and sooner or later on the water schedule, never yours, the true thing comes back around and asks to be read. Dylan Fisher runs his own survey crew now. He called me when he got his license, told me he still keeps a book, told me he tells his young hands the same thing I told him, the same thing Earl told me, write it all down. You'll never need it until the day you need it more than anything. There's a kid on my current crew, 22, running grade on the machine control screen, all GPS and no rod, sharp kid. Yesterday he came to me with a discrepancy. The model said one thing, his check shot said another, a couple of tenths off. Everybody else told him it was close enough. He came and found me instead. Mr. Phillips, he said, am I crazy or is this wrong? I looked at his numbers. He wasn't crazy. It was wrong. Small, catchable, cheap to fix. The kind of thing that's nothing on a Tuesday in a flood in June. You're not crazy, I told him. You're the one honest set of eyes before the mistake goes permanent. That's the whole job. Now go tell them to fix it and write it down first. He went and told them, and they fixed it. That's the ending. Not a courtroom, not an apology, not Dale Pruitt on his knees. Just a young man who checked his grade and an old man who taught him to keep the book and a road somewhere being built right because somebody wasn't afraid to say a number out loud. A word before I go. From one working man to whoever's listening. If you're ever standing where I stood, knowing a thing is wrong and being told to walk, I can't promise you it'll go easy. It didn't for me. I lost months of work and a chunk of my pride and some sleep I'll never get back. Being right cost me before it was ever worth anything. But I can promise you this. Keep the record. Not for revenge. Revenge is a low spot you build yourself, and the water finds it. Keep it, because the truth is the only thing that doesn't get tired and doesn't get scared and doesn't change its story when it's inconvenient. Do your work honest. Write it down plain. And when the world decides to believe something easier than what you know, don't argue and don't blow it up. Just keep your book and wait. Water runs downhill. Sooner or later, it always tells. And on the day it does, make sure you're the one holding the only honest record in the room. That's not revenge. That's just being good at your job when nobody's watching, which it turns out is the only time it ever really counted. Thank you for riding this one out with me. Take care of your grid.